with Skype, and I thought for a while, oh, hey, look at that, we're recording. Ladies and gentlemen, I am JK'z. This is JK'z Rewatchable Hour. We have a great show lined up. We have our fourth ever guest on the show today. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just get right to it. Let me introduce. As always, our editing team screws this up when they edit it. So wherever I say you are, just raise your hand because you never appear on video when they upload it. So below me is George Shuttlecock Muzzy. To my right, the only woman on the show tonight is Jennifer. I yell at the animals Welch, also my wife. And the last person is Eric Pornstash Evans. We call him Pornstash for a reason. Like I said, this is JK'z Rewatchable Hour. Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by several nicknames here. Evil Doss, Dr. Jeff. I can't read my handwriting. Yeah, we'll just go with Jeff. And the Gardener of Doom. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Mr. Jeff Lippman. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine. It's Evil Dose. That was created just to torment Evil Uno, who's a professional wrestler in AEW who's overachieved, and I would follow him around the internet. Whatever he said he was doing, I would say I did it twice as evilly, and for a while it was funny. Then it just became stupid, but I kept the name because other people started using it. The Gardener of Doom is because my podcast is called The Garden of Doom, or at least that's the flagship. Dr. Jeff Lippman was put upon me. It's an acronym. Other people started calling me that. I do have a doctorate, but my doctorate is not one where people call you doctor, nor do we call ourselves doctor. But people started doing it anyway on a wrestling podcast, and it took a life of its own. Or just Jeff, which works as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we all have nicknames. Sometimes it does get vulgar, and they like to just. A couple weeks ago, there was a mutiny. They tried to throw me off this show, and it's really weird. But luckily, my lawyers got involved, and they couldn't really do it technically. But no. So welcome to the show. Tell us what made you start the thought of having a podcast or talk show.
All right. Well, there'll be no Jeff on Jeff violence today, so fear not. I'm interested in the porn stash. Now, I don't really necessarily want to talk to the guy. I'd like to talk to the mustache and see what's going on there. I want to know why the mustaches are in this nickname that separates itself from the man. That, to me, is fascinating. Okay, so this is a long story, and we're going to make it shorter. So for a long time, I was the moderator of a pretty big professional wrestling Facebook group, like a very popular podcaster. Like one of the biggest in the world private podcasts, not like corporate supported. And through that, a lot of other podcasters got to know me and knew me before I knew them. So one of them reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to do a podcast. I'm like, sure, why not? And I figured it was going to be about wrestling because he was actually an artist in around wrestling. So one of the, like a Comic-Cons where you see people selling things, he would sell his art with regards to wrestling. And he had sort of grown up going to the indie shows and knew a lot of the guys, and a lot of them were on the cusp or had already arrived. Anyway, so this is around when COVID started. So probably around March we did our first show, and we were trying to figure out what to do. And he was like posting on Facebook. He had picked up a new habit, and it was gardening. It was very healthy, and apparently he was really good at it. He had a green thumb. So, what do you want the name to be? Well, what have you been doing? He's like, I've been gardening a lot. I was like, gardening. Yeah, well, we're stuck here. Garden of Doom. And yep, we're like, that's it. So that's the name. It was never meant to be an acronym for God or anything like that. It just sort of came out. And I don't know, about 15 shows in, he sort of abandoned me, moved on to do another show, which was probably what he wanted to do all along. Not abandon me, but I think if you ever listen to that show and my show, you could have said the same words and came to those independent show conclusions easily enough. And that's what happens when, you do something with a cyber friend, not someone you actually really know. Anyway, so it took me a while to bump around and sort of find what I was going to do. How do I book guests? What am I trying to accomplish here? How do I even get guests? And at some point, I just got lucky and then found my footing. So The title, there's now 3 titles under the same feed, which is a little bit confusing, I suppose. But there's Garden of Doom, Garden Views, and now there's God Presents the Book of Black, which is sometimes the Gospel of Thomas. And that might be the one that's most interesting because it's called Book of Black, because my co-host there is PJ Black, who's been a pro wrestler for 26 years. Some of you who watch WWE might remember him as Justin Gabriel. He was in the Nexus and the Core. And then my other co-host is Mr. Thomas from Major League Wrestling. He's active now. He's in the Boumaye Fight Club. And in theory, he hasn't materialized yet, and I'm actually thinking he's never going to do it. But Super Panda, who's an independent wrestler, but is actually more famous for other things under his real name, actually Emmy Award winning. And then the legendary Lufisto has said that she'll be on, but she's had a series of unfortunate events, so she hasn't come on. So that's my little team. But Garden of Doom is the flagship. So, anyway, like I told you, it was a long story. Believe me, I gave you the short version.
Perfect. I'm going to do a first ever spoiler alert. I know that out of everybody on the show, my wife Jen is the only one who knows this. Believe it or not, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a wrestler. And Eric knows that from school. Cool. And believe it or not, spoiler alert, I was actually trained by Al Snow out in Ohio in 1995.
So that's awesome. Do you still keep in touch with Al Snow?
Now, however, no, it wouldn't fit anyway. Now, however, I was so far and over my head that I knew I would never be able to accomplish it. And so not only Al Snow, but with D'Lo Brown. So, but I was just in over my head. But
well, at least you better recognize, as D'Lo said. So,
yeah. And it was right before Al Snow had his gimmick with the mannequin head. So that was right before that. So it was out in Ohio. So,
so that was the day that you. So that was the day that you found out wrestling wasn't fake?
Well, no, okay, hold on. Now, hold on. I don't want to take away from Jeff's show here. Some of it, we all know what it is. However, body slams, they hurt. The suplex, they hurt. There is stuff that hurts, but this show isn't about me. So how often do you do a show, Jeff?
Woo! Sometimes as much as well. We're going to stick to my own show. For a while, I had a wrestling podcast called Hammerlock Hangover. Then there's 2 episodes of something called The Watchmen, which is on the Hammerlock Hangover feed, which is mostly defunct. But The Watchmen is self-described as the PBS business hour of wrestling podcasts. If you're looking to be entertained, it's not the right show for you. If you want to go deep dive into the analytics and boring like Bloomberg, then The Watchmen is for you. But we've only put out 2 episodes. I think because I think the star of that show has been using us as a stepping stone to get into the more acceptable wrestling media ecosystem to the extent that there is one. I forgot the question.
How often
George.
do you do your shows?
Okay. So how many a week, I think, is what the original question was. So just my own. I got myself my own little famous meanderings. Up to 3 a week, usually probably 2 a week. I usually record Garden of Doom on Sunday afternoons around 1 o'clock, all times Eastern time. I usually record Garden Views, though I'm not as militant about Garden Views or disciplined as I used to be on Wednesday nights. But last night, the guest no-showed. Which, by the way, he was like a real estate guy, the highest maintenance potential guest of all time. Like, he was having his assistant, like, he wanted a Zoom invitation link like a month early. She kept asking follow-up questions. Like, not the important question. Like, if you're a busy business person, the important question is, how many listeners do you have? That was not the question he ever asked. Or what's your demographics? That wasn't the question. It was like, is it audio or video? Audio. Is it Zoom or what? Yes, it's Zoom. When are you going to send me the link? I already sent you the link because you asked me. Usually I send it an hour before to make sure that somebody's paying attention, that kind of thing. Anyway, so even that day, his assistant sent me something like around 3 and said, can you send the link early? I'm like, well, he already has the invite, so I don't know what's happening here, but okay, I'll send you a link. So I sent the link, and I waited 20 minutes and then the guy never showed. So that's that. So Garden Views Wednesday night, And then the Book of Black variety show, whenever we can coordinate with any pro wrestler and any one of the co-hosts, it's usually not that difficult because usually they're the ones who book the guest. It's when I book the guest that it's tough, is I've got to then get the wrestler to be on time. Though I will tell you, Mr. Thomas, if you're listening, or if anyone knows him, he is the most responsible and most responsive person I think I've ever met. He's more responsive than my mother. It's like he's not a busy person with a life and a pretty decent side hustle. So he's terrific. Like, he's really accommodating. Now, PJ, if you're listening, and I know you're not, so it doesn't matter. He's a busy guy. Like, he may just like text you and say, "Hey, I'm going to Vegas for 16 days. Don't bother me." And then he'll send you a picture, like in the that new live place, the 3D one that they just opened, the Probe or the whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Anybody have a specific question?
Not yet. I'm trying to come up with some stuff.
Yep. So you also are into movies and music, correct? Movies, TV.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm sort of famous for my reviews of movies and TV. I wouldn't say that I'm into it anymore because I consume a lot of podcasts and do a lot of podcasts, and I really like to sleep a lot. But yeah, I mean, I do. But the Garden of Doom podcast, it really went from being like a bunch of guys just talking about like the Anunnaki and, and stuff like that, to me interviewing. I don't know. I asked like a bunch of like big podcasters to come on the show, and some of them actually said yes. So I got like Sebastian Major from Our Fake History, Cliff Dunning from Earth Ancients came on, Kristen Anderson from Chris Stubbs from the Eastern Border, Mike Hilliard from the Red Line podcast. The host of this History of Africa has been on like 3 times. The host of the History of the Russian Empire has been on a couple times. So I really overachieved with that, and it's been sort of ever since that. So while it sounds like Garden of Doom, it sounds like it might be a little silly, it actually has turned into not at all. So what's coming up this next 4 weeks is I'm calling it the Parade of Professors, and they're all repeat guests, but I've got Professor Ed Barnhart, who's been on Earth Ancients, has his own podcast, Archeo Ed, but people probably know him from season 2 of Ancient Apocalypse with Grant Hancock. He was the archaeologist in the safari shirt in the episodes 5 and 6. He's a Mayanist. So we talked about that once, and this time we talked, the titular title was the Incas, but it turns out the Incas are a lot more recent than I had thought. So we talked about a whole lot of things, Andean, South American legends, lore, monsters, myths, and history as well. So Ed Barnhart, Professor Michael York, who's an Indo-European special, but I've had him on a bunch of times. I know him from something called the Nephilim Anthropology Conference. We talked about different Canaanite panoplies of polytheistic religions. So the Israelites gods, the Babylonians, the Akkadians, stuff like that. A little into Sumer. I've got Professor Richard Spence, who actually did Ed did a great courses also, or more than one, but Richard did the great courses for the history of the occult and secret societies. So this was his second time on the show, and we sort of went deep dive from the Essenes to the Cathars, Freemasons, and then things gonna come back another time, and we're gonna get into like Helena Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley and Rudolf Steiner and some of those names that you always hear bandied around. And then John F. White, who this is his 3rd time on the show, from Crackenford, that has over 200,000 subscribers on YouTube, and he's the greatest. And we're gonna talk about Dragon. So it's my little parade of professors, and then I have a guy named Chris Castro from a show called The Bayou Geeks, part of the Wrestling Soup family, which is adjacent to the podcast that I was a group member of. They're all friends. And he's going to talk about an aspect of Greek mythology that we don't talk that much about, the Titans or the monsters. We talk about the gods and the demigods a lot, some of the monsters, but the Titans sort of get a little bit of the shrift. So we're going to focus on the Titans and some of the monsters, and actually the giants of Greek mythology, which are a separate thing altogether. So
I got a question.
Yeah.
So what do you like? You're kind of all over the place with your doing different podcasts with different people, different guests. What is your like goal of using the podcast for? Like what we do at our podcast is we do it for many different things, to help people or just talk to people in the community or help people with mental illness. What do you I mean, I've taken on so much, just a little bit of time. What are you really trying to accomplish, as an individual? Or are you just trying to use it for, what are you using your podcast for, I guess? What are you trying to gain out of it or get out of it?
Well,
Besides
certainly
just,
nothing is, yeah. Go ahead.
because you have so much stuff, different people, different guests. But just what is your main goal of trying to succeed in a podcast? Or I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, it doesn't make sense. I mean, the goal is nothing as lofty or philanthropic as yours. I don't have any cause that I'm attached to.
Okay.
The main thing is my journey and adventure in learning about things that I didn't know about before. And the more I learn about, the more you peel the onion, the more you find that there's other layers underneath, and to do that exploration. So it's really me learning about stuff from people who know about it. Usually, sometimes it's just people hanging around and doing a deep dive into the show Lost or whatever. But it's me learning about things and pretending it's a show and hoping that other people get the same out of it. I sort of try to ride the line, like where I'm not like sort of like a Graham Hancock, Atlantis is real and you all live in the Matrix and are dopes kind of thing, but also like not the like the sort of the extreme science or skeptics that, nothing to see here, don't believe anything, obey the science, obey this. I want to be informative and entertaining. Garden Views is even more all over the place because it's more grounded in that it's legal and business and things like so.
Okay.
If this was a business model, it would make absolutely no sense. It's like, what do you sell in your restaurant? Yes. It's like a supermarket without the marketing or the space. So what am I trying to accomplish? Fun.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. George, you have anything?
Not right now.
I will say one thing though. One of the things I was trying to learn through Garden Views was I was very curious about what the laws of space might be, and I didn't really know how to get there without deep study, and I don't want to do deep study. I can't emphasize that enough. So I started with maritime law, and I somehow got the director of Berkeley's law school, the Maritime Institute, to come on. By the way, she did not want, like, I'm constantly trying to give out like Bond villain examples in international waters and stuff like that. And she's like, well, I don't think anybody would do that. I'm like, of course they would. Just imagine. She's like, well, I don't think the technology is there. I'm like, just pretend the technology is there. I mean, we have oil derricks in the Gulf of Mexico and the North Sea. Just imagine somebody move it a little bit further. And she did not want to play. But from there, I got the guy who ran Dulles Airports for 14 years, a retired 2-star general. I found an immigration attorney to talk about international immigration with regards to diplomats and NGOs and things like that. And I got some space journalists and some scientists and some space lawyers, and I did such a good job of it that it got me a part-time job that doesn't pay, of course, with 2 not-for-profits, one called the Space Court Foundation, which is in the U.S. and in Europe, and is, I guess if there's a cause, that's the one. And I'm also an advisory member on the American Legal Space. I can't remember. It's like it's like a space lawyer mentor for younger lawyers, basically.
That was my next question. Being that you do a lot of stuff with professors, I wasn't sure if you were attached to like a grant to help a professor do studies or research, something like that, and you're using the platform of the podcast to try to help with that. I
am not. Though anybody who is on my podcast that wants to use it for any purpose, they're welcome to. And in fact, when Kristaps was a little bit sick, and he had recorded with me a couple weeks earlier on sort of like the Anunnakian, in the eastern border and werewolves and Lithuania and things like that. I'm like, listen, if you feel like you want to drop a show just for your patrons, just use mine. He's like, thank you. And he just dropped it. So, I used to, I think they stopped doing the podcast, which is a shame. It was great, called The Midnight Myth. And, they were on a few times, and I just let them use the shows they were on as supplemental stuff. And the Persian version, Darius Kamali, he's like, I think he has 11 episodes of his show. He's actually making like a TV series on Cyrus the Great right now. But I think 2 of the episodes on the Persian version, like season 1, are actually Garden of Doom episodes. But I do use them we have a writing requirement at my office. It's 1 a quarter, and it's only like 600 words, which is nothing to do. But the podcasts, when they're legal, count as my blog. And since I do about, 5 or 6 of them legally related a quarter, it's, I feel like I'm, overachieving on my marketing goal for the firm as well.
Okay.
So I don't think I included Jen and Eric and George. You actually are on a platform called Spreaker. Did I say that right? Spreaker?
Mm-hmm.
And that's made for audio, correct? Or video audio?
To my knowledge, it is only audio.
Okay. So the only reason why I bring that up, so when we upload this to our RSS domain, it's going to get uploaded to iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, and I was listening to one of our podcasts the other day. It's really weird that I know everybody, but to hear them, I think it adds a new dimension. And is doing just the audio part something that you prefer over video, or what's your take on that?
I don't really have it's just how we started. So it's just how I kept up. I'm enrolled with Spreaker. I know how to use it. I'm 56 years old, so learning new tech is not exactly a big thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
And in fact, I try to avoid it as much as possible. But I've been on plenty of video shows, mostly other people's shows. I've been on, for those of you who know wrestling, Channel Attitude is run by Vince Russo, who was the head booker for WWE for a while.
Yep.
I think it's still WCW, TNA. So he partners with a guy named Bin Hameen, and so the Hameen Media Group and Channel Attitude. So I was on their Smack Attack, their SmackDown review show this Sunday. I've done a lot of PLE reviews for them. I've been asked to be the permanent co-host of Smack Attack, but I said, no, I don't feel like watching SmackDown every week, on an obligatory basis. I was on a network called the PWC. I was on a network called Unpopular Review, sometimes both. So I'm not opposed to video. I'm just, I don't really like doing the shows, the Garden of Doom shows, that is, live. Sometimes the things need to be edited. Sometimes things go in the wrong direction. I also, make sure people, I don't want people to worry about how they're looking or dressed or whatever. I just wanted to talk about something that they feel expert in, or that they know that if we're, if it's a friend of mine who's researched, like I have a friend of mine who's researching on the peacock imagery and mythology, I've given her an assignment. She's agreed to take it on. I don't feel like she has to do her hair and put makeup on, when she finally does report, and I ask her about why it was in the show Manifest and something nonsensical like that. So not opposed to it. It's just not my thing. PJ for a while wanted to do the Book of Black on it, but I think that it turned out to be harder to book people than he thought it was, even though he's friendly with them. They're busy. Some of them work for companies where you have to go through their PR department, and that's not always that easy. We've had some big people on. We've had a Tyrus on, EC3, guy Damian Sando, his name's Aaron Stevens. He's actually agreed to come on Garden of Doom for the Occult and Shakespeare, so I'm pretty excited about that, because he was a Shakespearean actor for a while, or at least trained in it. But I don't know. It just never happened. PJ is also pretty big. He's annoyingly handsome man. It's my face next to his is it's not a good thing.
I think it's cool that that every in our group on Facebook, there's hundreds, thousands of people with podcasts, which is great because this is how we're connecting. And everybody, you know, has a video and you do the audio, and that's, I think doing your own thing it's a great thing. I don't think it always trying to be a follower. I think doing your own thing and staying with what you're comfortable and making your own way, that's pretty cool. So I commend you for that and not being a follower. Me, I just like to see beautiful faces, and sometimes on our shows we play these games and we try to make each other laugh hysterical. That's where some of the nicknames come in, and so the reason why I gave my wife the animal yeller is because a couple of shows ago our dog and cat went at it, and she, like, you know, it was funny. And then Eric at one time had a mustache, so, you know, we go with that. And the shuttlecock is just, I don't know, out of the blue one day I just called him that. But so
it was our sports episode.
Sports episode, yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he was an astronaut that got kicked out of space program. Well, for the cock part.
Good one.
That was good.
Yeah.
That was good. So Eric had mentioned, you know, some of the things that we do on our show. When we started this show, we started with one purpose, was to give a different outlook on life. We try to help people. We try to change lives. And I know that you and I just recently met, and we're here on it live. We're helping each other, you know. Have you had anybody that reached out to you and said, "Hey, I really enjoyed your show. It helped me a lot." Not to toot our own horn, but we've had several people just say, "Hey, thank you for covering this topic." You said a wide range of topics and stuff that you've been affiliated with. Has anybody said, you know, to you, "Thank you," you know, like a listener or a fan? Anybody ever reached out like that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a handful of people who reach out to me routinely about stuff like that. Then I have other people that I know they must like the show because they basically send me like their research materials, like unsolicited, which is fine. And you know, most of them don't even want to be guests. They don't want to speak. They just sort of send me these things that they think would be helpful, and they are. They're interesting. They're helpful, but of course, they're like long, like 7-page articles on like ancient Thrace or whatever. Which, I mean, if they ever listen to the show, it's not a joke. I don't want to do my own research. That's like the whole point of the show, is to avoid doing research. And someone, you know, I learn better through listening. There have been people who have approached me and said that really helped me, and it was usually based on the show. So actually, one of the reasons I created Garden Views was, one of the early episodes, 50-something, was with a gentleman who was he escaped out of the Scientology church, you know, in his adulthood, but his family was in it from the time he was like 9 or 10. And actually, he's pretty well known in the former Scientology. Like, he works with Lisa Rimini, the King of Queens, the wife from there. So,
Okay.
So I had him on the show, and I'm like, this doesn't belong on a show called Garden of Doom. I mean, I need to just, Garden Views, interviews, fine. So, you know, so I created the second title. And that show didn't really have an identity until I realized, I'm a lawyer. I bet I know lawyers who do like interesting things. So I put a solicitation on a group I'm with, and like, lo and behold, one of them was, one of the two lawyers who sued Iran for the Beirut bombing, and that story, which is still continuing, but they won it, but took 20 years, and like they got laws passed on a federal and state level to change things to get there, prospectively, which is not how laws usually work. There was more common nowadays, but it wasn't then. One guy was an NFL agent, no idea. I didn't even know he was a man. His name was Joe Beth. I thought it was Joe Beth. It's Jobeth. And so I had him on the show. I had the guy who was actually the highest ranking JAG officer. He was the commanding officer to authorize use of force in the wake of January 6th. So he got there the night of January 6th. So he was the National Guardsman in charge of, if somebody could pull a weapon or use a club or whatever they had to deploy. He was that guy. I mean, there was nothing after the initial, rampage, but so luckily he didn't really have to, but that was him anyway. And so from there, then I got into the law space, and that made things easier. Then I enrolled in something called podcastguest.com, and most of that is for business and motivational, and I train professionals, and and here's how to have a healthy relationship, or deal with your autistic son, or live in a special needs marriage, and that's all great. It's just not. But every now and then there's somebody there who's like great for me, and I had some guy. He's got like 17 patents. He's making robots. Moved from California to Texas. I mean, it was just great. I mean, so I don't know. It's free. I mean, they make you sign something that you won't charge the guests to be on your show. Charge them. I'm just happy when they don't charge me.
So I'm sure that when you first started out, just like all of us, we ran into a lot of problems, and we really didn't have we never have an itinerary. We just kind of say we're going to do this show, and sometimes somebody. I'm not always the host. We each take turns. When you first started doing any type of a podcast or talking, what did you find some of the hardest challenges?
Well, when I first did it with a co-host, shout out to Shaheen, he's doing a show called Spitball Media now, and there they talk about movies and stuff and trailers and whatnot. I don't know. Actually, we didn't have any real problems with talking over each other, whatever. It just went pretty easily. And then ultimately we had some segments, but the show didn't last very long. What was my challenge? Figuring out what I wanted to do, and then getting guests, and sort of leaving from my 6 degrees of separation, and asking people to come on the show, and then getting over surprised that they'd say yes. I mean, and realizing that a 10% yes rate is fine, and now my yes rate is closer to 50%. I don't know. Those are it. The rest of it, I think, is mostly internal. Like, am I doing enough shows? Is my content good? Do I need to have? I mean, it's a little bit late for this, but as I think Eric was sort of getting to, your show has no identity. I mean, your show's basically an encyclopedia of everything, which is fine if you're Joe Rogan and everybody knows who you are, and you got signed, and the contract for $120 million by Spotify is your brand. The rest comes, and then you have like The Undertaker coming on, and UFC champions, and award-winning actors. That's the draw. You have Dave Chappelle on, no problem. So then I just said, you're doing your thing. Just do your thing, and I'm doing it for me, which I guess sounds selfish, but I mean, David Letterman, way back when, before he had the Late Show, he said that I do jokes for me, and I hope that the audience laughs, and he's done pretty well for himself, and
I think so.
That's sort of what now I'm not comparing myself to David Letterman or his level of success, talent, intelligence, or anything. But I did that always stuck with me from the time I was like 20 or whenever he said it. And, whatever. And hopefully I go on shows like this one, and, maybe your audience checks out one of the shows. I don't think all of the shows are for everyone, but they might be. But you're going to find things on that catalog of 350 shows that are going to be interesting to you. You may not give a hoot about Egyptian mythology, but you might be interested in, hey, what's it take to, buy a satellite and launch it into space? Yeah, I got a show on that from A to Z. So, and it is an encyclopedia of everything. So if you don't want to listen to 13 different podcasts to get to everything, you can just listen to one, and you'll get to everything.
Absolutely. Hold your questions. I'm just going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Oh, no, you didn't burn another one, did you? No.
No, seriously. I was watching a replay of the Bears game, and I burnt the cake. Oh, hey, look at that. We're back recording. I wish somebody would tell us that. I mean, who's running this show? Ladies and gentlemen, I am J-Dubs. This is JK'z Rewatchable Hour. With me is Jen, Eric, and George, and with our special guest, Mr. Jeff Lippman. We were talking about all about him and his podcast. You can find him on Spreaker. When you watch this, I will have all of his information so you can check out all of his shows. Of all the topics you have covered or told us about, what is one that you just can't wait to talk about on your next show? What's your next upcoming show?
Oh my goodness. I love talking about all of them. So it's really hard to say. The next, so I always have a few in the tank. So I have 4 shows recorded already, or 3 shows recorded already. I already talked about it with the Parade of Professor. So the next one actually is going to be with Professor White. Well, he's retired, so it's just John on Dragons. Next week, I told you about Chris Castro with the Greek mythology, Titans and stuff. But I've got shows, coming up. We're going to talk about the Peacock and mythology. I've got shows on. I can go through my calendar and go through all these. By the way, I want to know what Bears game were you watching, because the Bears have been knocked out of the playoffs since I think August. Isn't that about right?
Yeah, it was the highlights. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. We just proved that he's listening to us. We just proved that he's listening.
Yeah. Oh, so I got JJ Johnson from Southern Demonology in February on demons. He's been on the show multiple times. So a guy from Southern Demonology, I've yet to have him talk about demons because he's so goddamn interesting. He lived in Japan for 9 years, so his wife is Japanese. So we talked about Shintoism the first time. He's talked about the Ethiopian Bible, which to this day is still usually in the top 20 shows every single month, which is crazy. He like reads Ge'ez, which is ancient Ethiopian. He reads Old Hebrew. It's ridiculous. I have a guy named Lane who he's a business guy. But like one of the things he said is, I'm teaching people how to do the family office, and my only question to him is, what the heck is a family office? So I have no idea what's going into that, but I've heard people talk to me about family office. I've seen it on LinkedIn. What the hell is a family office? I mean, I assume it's a fancy way of saying your home-based business, but there's probably something to it. So we've got that. I have Gary Wayne. Yeah, that Gary Wayne, the Christian paranormal end of days guy. He's talking to me about the Watchers and demons and the Four Horsemen. So unlike JJ, who's going to be more academic about it, Gary's going to be a very, alternate. He calls himself a Christian contrarian. So he's very much Book of Enoch. The Watchers were real. The Anunnaki were real, but they're not the Anunnaki. They were actually angels and demons, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a question. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
So, you've done a lot of things that you've been talking about, a lot of different topics. What is something that you're really looking forward to, like on a bucket list, people or topics or whatever, something that you haven't peaked yet and you're trying to get to? Have you found that? Do you really know what it is, or you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I think that anybody who gets to a peak always sees another peak. I mean, I think that's just the nature. Though that's unnecessary. There's a couple things. One, I'm talking to a guy next month, Jason Colavito, who actually just wrote the book on James Dean, like a biography called Jimmy, that's apparently doing well. But he's a UFO journalist, but he's a skeptic as well. So from there, I would like to take it to sort of like your Green Streets and your George Knapps, and get to the Jeremy Corbell and maybe Luis Elizondo if one of them isn't the czar, the UFO office. I'm a step away from Graham Hancock. So I mean, that is the peak of one thing. I mean, I've had lots of people who are authors under his website, who have, who work with him, who moderate his website, who have been the featured author of the month. Obviously, Cliff Dunning and he are friendly acquaintances. So, I don't think it's impossible for me to get to Graham Hancock. So, I guess those are my two near-term goals, to get to the upper levels of ufology and the upper levels of, to Hancock, there is no upper level. I think I've already gotten to the upper levels of academia. I mean, I've had like Harvard and Yale trained people. I've got John Hupson for The Origin of Man. He's a professor from Kansas University, or University of Kansas, an archaeologist. So I think I've done pretty well there. Frankly, at this point, I just need to keep going until somewhere between 27 and 29, because that's when I'm told this great reset is happening. So, if I don't see a red dragon with 7 necks and 10 crowns coming out of the ground, like Vindicator and Alpha in X-Men comics or whatever, or Godzilla, if that doesn't happen, then then I'm done. I know that the end isn't nigh, because the end is always nigh. But
I just wondered if you were like maybe trying to through all this research and talking and recording, are you looking at maybe writing a book at some point about like trying to climb them out to what you've been doing for 10 years, 20 years on this podcast or in life in general? Or is that like your end goal is to maybe, write a book or something about,
definitely not
what you've accomplished? No. Okay.
Writing a book is just the opposite side of doing a lot of deep research. I'm not doing that.
You could use for like education, or you could sell to a professor, to a college, or maybe they would bring you in to do a talk to their class or something. You could take your learnings that you've learned through your podcast and research and use that to help upcoming, college kids or high school kids or what have you.
I would absolutely do that if anybody was interested, or if I knew of such a thing. I mean, Baltimore County Community College is walking distance for a regular person from here. Not me, but a normal person. I would absolutely do that. Really, what I want is for one day for my kids to say, and they're 21 and 24, to say, give them a listen and go, huh, that was actually kind of smart. That was sort of interesting. Maybe we should have given a better chance. Actually, my oldest son and I do a UFL podcast. It's the spring football league. It's going into season. The XFL and the USFL merge, so we decided to do that. And we do it on another network, the Sports Cat Network, which is also Power or Normal Guys. Actually, Glenn Jackson, he's in the group, so you've probably seen him around in the Facebook group. So I do some sports, but it's a 12-week season, including the championship. So we do 3 weeks of preseason, and then we didn't even do the season in review after week 12. So it's like 15 weeks. But that's something fun that I do with him. My younger son has no interest, but he comes by his stubbornness. Honestly, he gets that from me.
So just listening to all the topics that you've covered that you're interested in, one of the things that George and I like is conspiracy theories. What's your? I wanted to get your take on that.
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, everyone's interested in conspiracy theories. They're so rampant now that it's dangerous, and like there is no truth is the new truth, and that's a little scary. Like no one believes in any institutions. Like I agree, question authority, but but if you don't trust anything, it doesn't mean that you're super smart. It just means that you believe nothing, which is nihilism or anarchy. And we live in a society, so there's so you've got to find a balance between questioning. I mean, Abu Ghraib happened. The terrible withdrawal out of Afghanistan happened. Whether you think we should have been there or not, the withdrawal was hideous. There are, a young adult did shoot an executive in on a Manhattan street just a few weeks ago. I mean, so there's plenty of things, but yeah, I mean, I've done shows on conspiracy theories, and by getting into this, I now understand I understand what QAnon picked up on. I mean, they picked up on basically conspiracies and theories and beliefs that already existed. I mean, some of them thousands of years have just been retread. I mean, killing and eating babies is as old as we've been writing, and I'm sure older than that. But yeah, I mean, I like conspiracies and talking about it, though I have to be honest, and this maybe goes back to Eric's earlier question a little bit, sort of. I sometimes wonder if I'm not part of the problem by feeding into it a little bit. Then I remember my show's pretty small, so probably not. And I do try to strike a balance. I'm very big about being respectful to my guests. It's like, and that's my sort of moral high ground, is that they're guests. I should treat them as such, even if I think that they're, wackadoodle or way off. So But that is a struggle. I mean, how much oxygen do you want to give those things? So if I have a conspiracy on, I do try to book a guest for the counter conspiracy that's more on the fact-based side or the journalist side or academic side. So that's what I try to do to reconcile that. But I'm not sure if that's real or if that's just a rationalization. Maybe you guys can help me.
I mean, so like I said, one of the things that George and I we enjoy was conspiracy theories, and we've done a couple on that. And George, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Well, I know that. First of all, I know that you and I have been talking about doing an extra show, maybe not every week, but with just some of the guys that are on the show. And once I'm done reading this book, I know one conspiracy theory that you and I really enjoy is whether Billy the Kid died or not, when Pat Garrett claimed to have killed him. But I'm currently reading a book of the guy who came out in 1948 claiming to be him.
Are you familiar with Billy the Kid, Jeff? Sure. Yeah, okay.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Go ahead, George.
And once I'm done reading the current book that I just started it, but it's not an extremely long book. I think it's like 100 I think it's under 200 pages counting other things that are in the book. But once I'm done and I can do a little bit of research because I've read Pat Garrett's book.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if Jeff is reading it right now.
No, I haven't, but I will be.
Yeah. Because that was hard to find. I literally had to research just to get that book because it hasn't been printed since the 1950s.
Can you get an audio book or not?
I don't know if you can get the audio book. I don't know if it's available because, like I said, the actual book was last published. The last time it was published and printed was like 1954.
Oh,
wow. The paper book.
Yep.
And want to do a whole show just on comparing about that conspiracy theory of whether Pat Garrett's story is right or whether Brushy Bill Roberts' story is correct.
Yep. So let us get your take on that conspiracy theory as much if you want to indulge on Billy the Kid, Jeff.
I'm happy to indulge in it, but I mean, I have to confess, I don't know a thing. I'll just assume that the guy did kill him, and the guy who claimed he was him, 60 years later probably was just trying to get famous. But that's the Occam's razor answer. But I have no idea. I mean, people still say D.B. Sweeney is alive. I mean, so you could probably do a whole series on. Yeah, I mean, you could do a whole series on great criminals, whether they were actually dead or not. Jack the Ripper. I mean, there's a whole bunch that records of history get lost, and so I mean, in 50 years we'll still be talking about Epstein.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, that will never die. Yeah, that's a whole nother show. But so obviously you do shows quite frequently. I was thinking about this, and I'm like, should I even ask? So describe what your typical day is like, knowing that you have a show or two to do a day.
Well, I don't do a show or two a day. I do a show or two a week, sometimes 3.
Oh, a week, okay.
Though, if you count guesting, like I'm doing today, I mean that happens quite a bit. But I mean, those are usually wrestling podcasts, so I mean, there's no preparation required for those. It's just conversation, or they're having me on because of information I've already provided. They just want me to elaborate it for their audience, which is perfectly fine. And anyone who knows wrestling, it's whatever you think of it, it's 365 days a year. There's a bunch of different organizations. It's a gigantic business, and it's a small business, and it's everything in between, and everything that's dirty and carny and backwoods and it still exists even in the biggest company in the world, let alone all the other ones. So it's endlessly interesting, and I am interested more in the law and the business aspects of wrestling than I am in wrestling. Like if you say, do you want to watch a 45-minute match? I'd be like, yeah, probably not. So I'm sort of a unicorn. I'm a longtime casual fan, but I can come off as a hardcore fan, but I'm really not. Be like, what's your favorite WrestleMania match to rewatch? I'm like, I don't rewatch wrestling. Sorry. Like, or if I do, I'm going to watch like squash matches from the Road Warriors in 1983 when they just like killed two. No.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Or see Brock Lesnar destroy John Cena that one SummerSlam. I mean, yeah, that's entertaining for me to watch. Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay go for 47 minutes. Yeah, not interested. If I want to play a video game, I learn how to play a video game. My day, I work from home. I have a fantastic job. Shout out to my employers. I work from home. I wake up around 7:30, unless I actually wake up before my alarm clock. I get myself semi-presentable, which is, however presentable I feel. The big question is, do I brush my teeth before or after coffee? It's usually after. I roll into this room, which is also my office. I turn on my computer. I deal with my emails and stuff. And if I have to do any work, I do it. And I listen to a whole bunch of podcasts. Like I start with Up First. I go into the daily, and then whatever else is next after that. I try to roll through as many podcasts as I can before 9 o'clock hits, and then I'm generally working most of the day.
So I have to ask I have to ask you, you listen to our podcast?
I only just met Jeff, so not
just
yet.
2 days ago. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. But on the audio, I'm certainly going to give it a shot because, you put me on the show, I'm going to reciprocate. I don't think enough people actually do that. People say they do, but they don't. Like when you go on Facebook and say, for my birthday, all I want you to do is just download my podcast. I gotcha. And I would know if there were 400 more downloads. I'd see that. Even if I had 20,000 downloads before, I would see 20,400. I would see it. I would know the difference. Yeah. So it's it's hard to get, but I understand this is like LinkedIn. Everybody's selling, nobody's buying.
Yeah, except for the group on Facebook. Everybody seems to be like they all want everybody to succeed. So go ahead, Eric. Were you saying something?
No, go ahead.
So the reason why I asked you, what your day was, I should have said, what is your typical day when you know that you're going to be doing a show or a guest? My day usually starts on Sunday when I message our group. Okay, who's all available for Thursday? Because sometimes life just happens, and then for like the next 3 or 4 days, I'm just thinking about, okay, who we got on, how are we going to do this, how are we going to do that, and then today when you said, hey, we still have for tonight, and I'm like, yep, but I was not prepared, so now I have to, and that's why I was asking you all those questions, and so for like 5 hours, I was like, okay, this is how we're going to do it, this is what we're going to ask, and so our moniker is Not Your Average Podcast, and we rarely ever do research here except for Becky. Our other co-host, Becky, does all the research. So one of the things that I'm learning is you're very well prepared in everything that you're going to be talking about. You rattled off like 50 different things.
I'm going to try. I'm fairly old to be a podcaster. I'm fairly well read, both fiction and nonfiction. I consume a lot of stuff, between podcasts and audiobooks. And I've learned to really enjoy nonfiction and audiobooks. I really rarely could read nonfiction before, but on audiobooks, I found I've done it. But I don't prepare them. Usually I'm asking the person, for a topic that I want. So there's already things that I have questions about. Or I've heard their presentation before, parts of it on the Great Courses or another podcast. If somebody's authored a book and they're kind enough to send it to me, I read the book, which apparently a lot of them are surprised. I interviewed a couple of authors that they were self-published. They wrote their books. In a couple cases, they were really bad. And they're like, oh, you read the book. No one's ever asked me those questions before. I don't think anyone's read the book before. Thank you so much. I'm like, that's part of the job, I guess. But but maybe it just seems like I'm prepared because I listen to the guests and I have questions that aren't idiot. The thing is, a lot of what I cover, a lot of it sort of repeats or rhymes. So you could have something completely asinine, but the professor or the intellectual who you're talking to is going to know why you said it, and they're going to tell you why you're wrong. So if you say, why is Isis Aphrodite, and they'll be like, no, Isis isn't an Aphrodite, but other Near Eastern goddesses, were imported to become Aphrodite. So they're not going to make me look like an idiot because they're nice. But I sound like I asked something that made a little bit of sense, even though there's, probably Hathor is probably the one, or some, I'm, just saying Greek or Egyptian names now. I don't remember who's who. Another reason I keep the podcast, I can't remember all this stuff, so it's there forever for me as well. But I appreciate that you think that. I mean, I try to be prepared, but I don't do a whole lot of research typically for a particular guest or topic. I mean, again, not to sound overly lazy, but that's what they're for. They're there to answer questions that I already have, and from questions flow other questions. But there are occasions where I just sit there and shut up for like 20 minutes, just listening to someone talking and just being like, just keep going, man. I have nothing to add to what you have to say. I mean, just go. And, hopefully it's interesting. Like, I had a gentleman who wrote a book on African proverbs and how they found their way into the Bible. I have almost nothing to add on that. I mean, I do want the audience to remember I haven't died and it's still in my show, so I pop in every now and then. But mostly it was just like, go, man, go. Just, do your thing. Now, I don't know that anybody would like that show, except somebody sent me a DM saying that his brother listened to that episode and really enjoyed it. And I'm like, awesome, because I have no idea how a show like that would be received, because it's not a Christian focused show. It's not there are lots of religious shows, and that's over a religious topic. Like, I do comparative religion, but more from a mythology than a theology standpoint, though I've danced with that. I mean, I've had a show on who are Mormons, but with a former Mormon minister. I had a show on the Apocrypha, the non-canon Gospels. That's as much conspiracy theory or as myth as anything else, because they're non-canon. I mean, that's the basis of a lot of conspiracy theories. Who was Mary? Why were these Gospels not included? Did Thomas not know that Jesus didn't resurrect? I mean, these are some of the oldest conspiracies, in the last 2 millennia. So, it's great. I mean, the Book of Enoch is all of that stuff with the fallen angels and then the Watchers and then what happened to them, and it all ties into the Nephilim, which is what sort of got me into this show thing, because I'm reading, I'm bored of the service. I'm reading the Genesis, and I'm like, what the hell's a Nephilim? What is this word? And then I realized that nobody knows, or the people who do know, they mostly have different interpretations of it. I've since figured it out. Spoiler, I'm not going to tell you, but it's because it probably wouldn't go over well with a lot of folks as well. But it isn't any great conspiracy or anything like. Oh, I will give it. The Nephilim are just the demigods. Basically, almost every mythology has gods, usually men, doinking human women and having offspring, and and the Nephilim are just the
Oh boy.
Judaic version of that, which then got adopted by Christianity.
I personally have just one more question, and then out of all the topics in the world, what is one topic that you will never ever host or be a guest about?
Wow.
Good one.
I stumped them. Oh, woo, woo.
Never is a really tough word. I mean, there's lots of things I'm not competent to talk about at all. I mean, I don't think I should talk about like a serious religious topic, framing the show as a serious religious show. I mean, that would be off limits. I don't want to do something where is there or isn't there God? I don't want to get into that with people. I try to stay away from politics, but I fail quite a bit.
Perfect.
I try to stay out of the culture wars to the I don't really do pop culture. Like you're never going to hear me weighing in on like Jay-Z versus Kendrick Lamar or what's happening with the Kardashians. So I mean, I don't think that's the big grandiose topic that you were looking at. That's something that's like taboo. I'm sure I'll think of something later, but there's a whole world of things that I wouldn't talk about just because either they're no win or they're just not of any particular interest to me.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that we never talk about is politics. I mean, we'll talk about everything else. Just politics is just. I think we all agreed never to talk about it. So, so I'm going to open the floor to George, Eric, and Jen if they have any questions whatsoever.
I'm waiting from Jen because she's been sitting there just shaking her head. She's your wife. I mean, I'm not sure if she's a prisoner or if this is a Stockholm syndrome thing.
It's already been covered.
Okay. All right. Great question, Jeff. All right.
Eric or George?
Yeah, I got something. Going back to the wrestling, what is like one of your most liked things to do to talk about? I mean, you said you like talking like the nuts and bolts of wrestling, not so much the matches or, the Hollywood side of wrestling. So what do you really focus on? What is your goal to really, during that interview, whoever it may be, what are you trying to accomplish if you're not really into the drama or the Hollywood or the matches or the events? What do you bring them on there for other than just on, what I mean?
Well, the show with the wrestlers on, we mostly talk about non-wrestling stuff. Though when you have two wrestlers there, they inevitably talk about some stories from the road. I mean, like PJ,
their personal side of a wrestler mainly, not so much the business side, or is it where the business and the personal life comes together? So
it's a very different dynamic when PJ is the co-host from when Mr. Thomas is the co-host. Mr. Thomas likes to hit like he'll say something like, "Why don't white people use Cash App?" And we'll have a conversation about that, or it's like clones, or why do people date their mother? Things like that. PJ always wants to talk about the Matrix and something esoteric. So we've had people talk about things that are very important to them, but EC3 and PJ were talking about Bray Wyatt, who died a couple of years back, and they both started crying, and they were telling a story of how they all went out, and they were naming a bunch of other people's, but they're using people's real names and first names. So I'm like, who's that? And they're like, oh, he's in WWE. He's and it turns out it was Tama Tonga, and apparently like he ran away, and Tom Latimer, Bray Wyatt saying you Wyndham, he's saying you can't tap me out, and he didn't tap him out. He put him to sleep, and he went flat down, smashed his nose, bleeding, and just like Bray Wyatt, the character, he got up hysterical laughing. Tavita, who's Tama Tonga, apparently got freaked out and ran away. And then like, a minute or so later when Bray came to, he started laughing. He's like, "See, I told you wouldn't tap me out." I mean, it was like the Austin Hart match, where he just bled and passed out. But I like talk. So there's a bunch of lawsuits going on in wrestling that are in and around wrestling, which are pretty big. So I like covering that stuff. I'm very interested in numbers, viewership, ratings, the amount of dollars per viewer, the sort of transition, whether it's real or not, to streaming, whether I'm sort of a streaming skeptic. I think that once you're in an app, it's like good for appointment TV. Like if you want to watch a movie, but if you're just flipping around, it's clunky. I think they're terrible. So, I don't know what the future is. So part of what I'm doing is fighting the ocean. I think is fighting the tide.
Yeah.
But
right.
And part of it is just because I think AEW is first of all, we've never seen a wrestling company, or I haven't as an adult, where you knew when it was an idea and you saw it formed and you saw it getting birthed and you see it grow up, but before your eyes. But it's also an absolute shit show. And the only thing that's keeping it together is that you have a billionaire who's the son of a multi-billionaire who can fund it forever. And then you've got like these cult members who, because they hated other wrestling or they hated Vince McMahon. Lots of good reasons for that. They like put all of their like wrestling energy into this before anything happened. And it's like
I personally believe I personally believe with professional wrestling would not be around anymore if it wasn't for TV. I think TV has kept it around, honestly. Because you don't, unless you go to the events, or like the reason I say that is that they've went through so many different TV publisher contracts and all this through the years, and now they're even going more to Netflix. So they're keep chasing the money. Because why? Because you can only put so many people in an arena. You know what I mean? The only time they have big events is when they're in a football stadium or outdoor events. Other than that, they're basically like a hockey rink. They have hockey audiences, and that's why the NHL is kind of like limited the same way, because they don't have big arenas like NFL does. That's why the NHL reaches out to the Winter Classics, the Stadium Series, kind of like WWF does or WWE does, to get more of an audience, because that's their big nugget they can make every 3 or 4 months. That's what my take is on it, because wrestling has changed a lot in the years since when we were all younger in the 80s and 90s. I mean, it was, as far as I'm concerned, that was the best day in wrestling, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And it kind of got, I don't honestly watch it on a daily basis anymore. If there's nothing on, I'll watch it. Yeah.
Haven't watched it in like 7 years.
Yeah. I just, when Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage and the British Bulldogs and, the Ultimate Warrior and they were cool guys, it was like kind of like NASCAR, it was like after Dale Earnhardt died, NASCAR ain't NASCAR anymore,
I mean, just for me, and we'll get back to Jeff here in a minute before we close. The reason why I don't watch wrestling is because nothing's hidden anymore. Like, I grew up a huge fan, and after a while, it was almost like I thought people, and I have no room to talk, but got lazy. Like, I could call out the spots and I could call out everything that was going to happen, and it just got lazy, and that's why I stopped watching it. And but whoever's a fan, I support you, and I'm okay with it. So,
I am too. So. I feel the same.
Yeah.
I mean, explaining why you don't watch wrestling as an adult isn't something that you should feel you have to do. I mean, it's perfectly normal to not. It's abnormal to still watch wrestling as an adult. It is abnormal that I watch 12 hours of wrestling a week on an average week. I mean, sure, I do a lot of fast forwarding, and and some of it is just because because I know some people in NWA and I know some people in MLW, so it's like obligatory. So, but so I try to enjoy it, and it's not like you can't do other things while you're watching wrestling. It's not like you have to study the thing.
Yeah,
but I am much. But Eric, the things you were talking about, like the business and the Netflix and the dollars and how they get the exposure and try to grow, that's more interesting to me than whether Sami Zayn gets a push or whether he and Kevin Owens are going to fight. I mean, I like a good story too, and then there's and that's interesting. But for the for most of the card, it's like whatever. But
no, I agree with you. I think the storylines have just gotten so blah. But could continue.
Yeah. But when you watch some of the smaller feds and when you even NXT, which is the developmental brand of WWE, you sort of do get invested in some of the kids who you see, like they've been recruiting these athletes on what's called the NIL program, which people say next in line, but it's name, image, likeness, same as the NCAA. And you see people who were like D1, athletes and whatever, never wrestled, and then within a year or two, like some of them are really, really good. Others never get it, but it's sort of fun to see their advancement. And then they go up to the main roster or then even if they get released, they seem to have a career on the indies, at least for a bit. So, I mean, it's interesting. It's also tough because then people get released. And before I was like, they have too many people, release 30 people. Now it's like, I know 3 of those people not that I know, but I was fans of them. And now it's like, oh no. So it's like, in some ways it's humanized me a little bit on that. But I do remind myself every week when I watch football, when the cornerback blows or the quarterback throws an interception, I'm like, bench them, fire the head coach, get that cornerback off of that, get someone who can keep up with the receiver. That's all of us. So, I mean, do any of us cry in preseason when they have 110 people and cut it down to, 60, 62 or whatever the practice squad is? So, no, we don't. So that's life. It's a meritocracy.
Right.
I have a true story, though, about Randy Savage adjacent. So, that his brother is Lanny Poffo, or was Lanny Poffo. Okay. So, for a while, I was friends with a lot of wrestlers on Facebook. Not because we were friends, just because they accepted everybody and they're trying to sell you stuff. Go to this, buy my merch, whatever. It's no great point of honor. It just is the thing. But I was trying to get him to. I was doing interviews for another show, and I got Mark Merrow and Nikita Koloff, and then some other people who are fairly big names. I was trying to get Lanny Poffo. I couldn't get his attention. Turns out he moves to Ecuador. My wife is from Ecuador, so I'm like, hey, why don't you contact him? Oh, she's also smoking hot. Like, I so overachieved, it's ridiculous. So she sends him a message. Contacts right back within 30 seconds. So they do a YouTube. She had a YouTube channel. She took it down, but she had a YouTube. She did like 5 videos. They're actually sort of cute. So she does an episode with Lanny Poffo where she's interviewing him for an hour. This is probably 5 years ago. So her English is much worse than his Spanish was shit. Neither one of them knew what the other was saying half the time. But the whole time, he's hitting on her. And it's fantastic. So I have friends that watch it. They're like, yeah, and I can see what they're saying. I'm like, yeah, I know he was hitting on her. They're like, yeah, I didn't want to say anything. Like, yeah, no, I know. They're like, you like it? I'm like, yeah, I'm like Rusev. I'm going to voyeur a little bit. Sure. Yeah, I think it's great that Lanny Poffo is into my wife. So he's calling her. He texts her up until the day before he died. He was calling. In fact, he was in New York, and he was en route, or his next stop was Westminster, Maryland, which is 25 minutes northwest of here. I mean, he was going to a WrestleCon. He's inviting her to go to WrestleCon. And she's like, well, I'll come with my fiance. We were married yet. And he's like, no, just you. And she's like, well, no, I'm not going to come. And the next news I heard about him, he's died. So I'm always saying that my wife killed him of a broken heart.
Wow. Sorry.
Hold on 1 second. If we record, you can just continue. Okay.
Well, that was the story.
So he died of a broken heart.
He did. Lanny Poffo died as broken heart. He never made it to Maryland.
Wow.
That's it.
Okay.
But you know what Lanny Poffo was famous for, right? Other than being Randy's brother. Oh, he said he could, commit self-fellatio.
Yeah.
And apparently it was verified.
Okay.
Okay.
Research. So just before we just officially end the show, George or Jen or Eric, any last comments or questions?
Earlier you said that watching a 40-some minute match, is boring. I totally agree. They call it one of the best matches there was Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania, the Iron Man match.
Yeah.
I thought like 49 minutes of that match was just like two guys rolling around the mat. It was like, we didn't need it.
Right.
The beginning and the end is all we needed.
Mm.
And it would have made that match so much better. It didn't have to be an Iron Man match.
Mm.
I literally think, because I think they were two of the best performers.
Oh, yeah. By far.
To ever wrestle. Mm-hmm. And like I said, for 40-some minutes, they rolled around the mat doing nothing, basically.
Waste time.
You're not going to get an argument from me on that. I mean, I've seen 2 Iron Man matches that I can think of that I was actually intrigued from beginning to end, or maybe I wasn't painfully bored at any point during it. It's probably about
some of the ones that had more pinfalls in them, or more wins and losses during the match. I mean, literally that one, there was one pin in the whole match, and that was that was actually in overtime because they went over the hour, and it was like I said, for 40-some minutes they were just two guys rolling around on the mat. It's like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
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 I don't want to see that either. We're in agreement.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of them
Yeah.
are.
Sometimes I would have rather just had the story and then a quick match and be done with it. And that would have been so much better.
Give me a 6'5", 280-pound guy, power slam a guy 3 times in a row and take the 3 count. I'll take that. I'll take my little cartoon come to life every time over, a 55-minute, catch match, British strong style.
Yeah,
I'd like to say that a power slam actually does hurt. Anyways, go ahead, continue.
Yeah, that's it. I'm fascinated that you trained with Al Snow. I mean, he's making a bit of a resurgence with the OVW and the Netflix series, The Wrestlers.
No, I haven't. No, I haven't watched it. No.
Oh, it's really good. Only one season. It catalogs. It's like a docuseries on him trying to run OVW with their new, which is Ohio Valley Wrestling, which a long time ago was a giant feeder. Brock Lesnar came out of there. John Cena, Randy Orton came out of there. Haas and Benjamin came out of there. So it was a bit Batista. It was a big deal. Now it's just an indie, and it's owned by like a sportscaster and I think like a car dealership owner out of Louisville, Kentucky. And it's sort of like Al Snow and one of the Basham brothers, I think, trying to sort of run it and run a wrestling company. And a couple like Haley J, she sort of come out of that as a star. Like I see her on NWA now, and I saw her at MCW, which is Maryland Championship Wrestling, and so and she was on I think AEW once on one of their pre-shows. It was fun, but it's a good show. It's interesting. It's like a documentary, but it's also wrestling, and it's fun. It's interesting. But there's only one season. They're hoping for a second, but it feels like it's been a long time between season 1 and what would be season 2. So I'm not so sure.
Yeah. If you hold on, sorry, George, I apologize. If you said that you want it, what's that?
I gotta go let Dozer out, so I'm gonna
go. Okay. Thanks, Jen. If you want to have on your show a wrestler, I know the only one out of our group that made it big. He's a friend of mine. I can actually put you in touch with him if you want to interview a wrestler.
I would love to, and it's not just going to be me. Most likely, it's going to be me and another wrestler, but we're probably going to. But like everybody has something that's in the Garden of Doom universe that they like, and that's what I do like to. But if it's Mr. Thomas, he'll have a list of things. And if I know it's Mr. Thomas, I'll have my own list of things too. So, we'll also bring up drones in New Jersey and UFOs and whatever the topics of the day are. So, yeah, I'd love to. And it's what's best is when I book somebody, I feel like I'm pulling my weight.
Right.
Go ahead, Eric.
I know one too. His name is Jeff Welch.
No, I never made it. No.
Well, there you go. He can interview you on why he didn't make it. He didn't make.
Yeah, because I was
JKW. Put us out there. Come on.
I was so far out of my league, and but I'm gonna reach out to my friend after the show, and I'm gonna see if he's okay with me giving you his information, and then you two can touch base and go from there. How's that sound, Jeff?
It's fine. I won't stalk him. I mean, I think the fact that there's already 2 to 4 wrestlers that are already in the rotation, so that I'm not going to become their, best friend involuntarily.
Yep. No. I mean, if you interview wrestlers and it helps you and it's something that you like, I want to be able to help. So that's what we do here.
That's great. And that's one of the things about wrestling. Everybody knows somebody that's in the wrestling business, so it is relatable in that. It's like I don't know any NFL football players. I mean, I've run into Ravens around town, but I don't know them, A, and B, they were already famous when I bumped into them. So I don't know anyone who made it to the major leagues. I know a couple of people who are in the minor leagues, but it's not the same. It's like, every rich person knows somebody who is almost a pro golfer, who has at least been a pro golfer once or twice. Everybody at country club probably knows someone who is, or knows someone who is a, pro tennis player. But everybody knows somebody who's in the pro wrestling business. So it's very relatable in that. So everybody feels like they're an insider, which is part of the reason it's so weird and tribalist, but it's also some of the reason that's fun. And people say tribalism like it's a bad thing. Why? I mean, I just made fun of your Bears. I mean, and I'm not even in the NFC North.
So the most ironic thing is Eric is a Commanders fan.
Yeah.
Oh, see, so you're my '95 rival.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you are a Redskins or Ravens fan, but you already said Ravens, so.
Ravens fan. I was a season ticket holder from day one. I haven't been in a while. I had to sell the sales and the tickets in the divorce, but it's.
You're actually a Cleveland Browns fan, but anyways.
The Cleveland Browns have been resurrected even worse than before.
Right.
It's like the history's only resurrection that turned out worse.
George, do you have anything to ask or add?
Just that probably unpopular for the area I live in, but I'm actually going for the Ravens this weekend.
Whoa!
Unpopular for the area that we live in. Very much.
Are you in Texas?
No, we're close to Buffalo.
Close
the Bills.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't hear that Great Lake accent.
Good pick. Yeah.
I spent a good amount of time away from New York when I was in the military and whatnot. So a little bit of an accent.
Kandahar shooting giants in the mountains.
Yeah.
Way back.
That's one of those conspiracy theories that there's U.S. Special Forces encountered a red-haired giant with green eyes in the mountains of I don't know, Tora Bora or whatever. I don't know what the mountain ranges are there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what they say.
But so Eric, anything?
No, I'm good. Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, Jeff.
Yeah.
Very
Thank you.
Hey, well, thanks for having me. I feel like I should get a cause, like something a little bit more philanthropic. Listen, I have been trying to raise money for Lufisto's GoFundMe. She needs money. So if you want to help Lufisto, 25-year veteran, she's on her third surgery, she is you can help out Lufisto. And I'm not a fan of this guy, but Chris Bay, he broke his neck in action in wrestling. His medical bills, I'm sure, will be taken care of by the company, but he's lost his income and he's probably going to need, some type of care for the rest of his life. So contribute to his GoFundMe. If you're into wrestling and you want your philanthropy to be direct, you're not sure which charitable group to go for. Those are two where there's actual people that you can see and help and make a difference directly.
We will definitely look into that because that's what we do. We like to have fun and make fun of each other, and we do these mess up games, but we also like to help and change lives. So Jeff, I want to say thank you for not only talking to me on Facebook, but for agreeing to come on the show. I know we all have busy schedules, busy days. I just want to say thank you for taking the last hour and a half out of your day to sit with us, and we greatly appreciate you, sir.
I appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much. Send me the link. I'll be sure to, send it around all the socials. Give it a listen and listen to how cringe I am, because we all hate how he sounds.
Don't we all? But after we get done recording, we hang up the call. I'm going to send you some messages, some of the stuff that I need, just so I can upload it with stuff like that for all of your information. Because I want everybody that watches this, listens to this, to go directly to you and listen to your podcast and to your content, and to help you, not only help us, but help you as well. And on to the next one, to the next big thing with you. So don't be afraid to always reach out. We love having guests. Our content is everything. We welcome you to come back on the show another time.
Good, because I have questions for all of you. First of all, I want to know how you do a podcast with 8 people. Secondly, I'm wondering why you just don't get to 9 so that you can have, the Olympian number or the Templar number and actually form an order. So
I'll let Eric answer.
You don't have a tiebreaker. I mean, if you're voting, it could be 4-4. You could be at loggerheads forever.
Go ahead, Eric.
Sometimes we're even and sometimes we're odd.
Yeah.
Well, I'm always odd. I think you already learned that, but I don't know. Like 9, you could become.
Oh,
you
yeah,
could,
one
you
is not odd. So, yeah.
You could be the Knights of the Great Lakes Eastern Division of, Greater Niagara.
We sometimes we have 7 or 8, 9 people at once. Sometimes we just have 2 or 3. So, but we make
Knights of the Algonquin Cross, something. I don't know.
But we make this work, and again, thank you for coming on the show. I'm not going to keep you anymore, but I'm going to send you some information that I need from you, and then I will send you all the information once our editing team uploads it and does all that, and we will get it to you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening.
Credit card numbers, all of it.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'm going to need that 3-digit, security code too. Yeah.
Security codes, PIN numbers, fingerprints, retinal scan.
Urine sample, yep, absolutely. For Eric Evans and George Muzzy and Jennifer Welch, I am J-Dubs. Thank you, Jeff Lippman, for coming on our show. I'm going to bid you all farewell. I love you all. You all have a blessed day. We are out here in 2 seconds.
You just stumbled upon JK'z Rewatchable Hour.